I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here we are. My name's Dave, and I've got a story that might sound familiar to some of you. It's about betrayal, confusion, and realizing that the person I trusted most in this world turned out to be someone completely different behind my back. My wife, Lisa, and I met almost 10 years ago. We were young, in love, and pretty happy, or so I thought. She was sharp-tongued, sometimes bitchy, but I always figured it was just her way of being funny or tough. She's a fiery woman, a bit manipulative, but that's what I liked about her, her fire, her independence. We got married 4 years ago after a whirlwind romance. Everything seemed perfect. We had a good life, a nice house, and 2 dogs. I was a software engineer, she worked in marketing, and everything was smooth on the surface. But lately, I'd started noticing little things. She was more irritable, secretive even. She'd disappear for hours without telling me where she was going, or she'd get defensive when I asked questions. At first, I chalked it up to stress at work or her trying to get ahead in her career. But then I noticed her phone. She started keeping it more hidden, changing passwords, swiping away messages quickly when I entered the room. Small stuff, but enough to make me uneasy. The first real sign, though, was when I caught her texting someone late at night. I didn't think much of it at first. She always had her phone out, but I'd never seen her intentionally hide things before. One night I saw her typing a message. It was brief but intimate. She called the guy babe in one message, and I froze. My stomach sank. I knew that wasn't just a friend or a work acquaintance. I felt this strange, sinking feeling that something was seriously wrong. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I kept quiet, watching her closely. Then came the subtle changes in our intimacy. She'd dodge my touch, act distant during sex, and when I tried to talk about it, she'd brush me off or call me paranoid. "You're overthinking, Dave," she snapped one evening when I brought it up. "You're always suspicious. Maybe you're just insecure." That hurt. I wasn't insecure, I was worried, but I didn't want to believe she was cheating. Not yet. I told myself maybe she was just stressed or having a rough patch, but deep down I knew something was off. And then the final straw hit me when I started noticing her phone bill. There was a new number, an unknown one that kept appearing in her texts and calls. I looked it up, and it belonged to a guy named Mark, a surgeon she'd recently started seeing for her cognitive rehabilitation after her brain injury. She's been in a bad accident, hit her head hard, and needed extensive therapy. She was supposed to be focusing on her recovery, but I discovered she's been sneaking around with this guy, seeing him in secret, probably sleeping with him. The thing that makes it worse, I found out through her own medical records of all things. She's been reconstructing her neural pathways, trying to recover her memory, and part of that was a process called neural pathway reconstruction. The records showed her brain was literally rewiring itself, and she prioritized positive memories with Mark, supposedly her surgeon, while downplaying our life together, our memories, everything we built. It's like she's been rebuilding her mind to favor this new relationship over the marriage she once claimed to cherish. The records even showed her neural connections with me. Those emotional bonds we shared were being severed. It was like I was being erased from her brain, and I didn't even realize it until I saw the evidence laid out in black and white. That's when I knew she'd been lying to my face from the start. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been betraying me emotionally, physically, and seemingly mentally, all while pretending everything was fine. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, like my entire world was collapsing. I wanted to confront her, but I wasn't sure how. I was furious, heartbroken, and mostly just lost. I knew that if I didn't do something soon, I'd lose her completely, or worse, stay with her and keep pretending I didn't know what she was doing. So I waited. I gathered everything, the texts, the records, the evidence, and prepared myself for what was going to come next. I didn't want to just accuse her blindly, but I knew I had to confront her. I had to hear her lie again, or maybe for the first time, admit what she'd been doing, because I was done being the fool in this game. I needed answers, and whatever she said after that would determine what my next move would be. The day I decided to confront her, I was a mess. My stomach was knots and my mind was racing 100 miles an hour. I kept going over everything I'd found, the texts, the medical records, the way she'd been acting. It all added up to one thing. Lisa had been cheating on me with Mark, her surgeon, and from the way her records showed how her brain was reprogramming itself, it wasn't just physical. It was like her mind was rewiring to prioritize that affair over everything else, including our marriage. I waited until she was out of the house. She'd gone to some appointment, probably to see Mark again, and I slipped my phone into my pocket. I knew I had to get her to admit it, or at least catch her in the act. I wasn't going to do something reckless. I wasn't that guy. But I knew I had to be prepared for whatever her reaction was going to be. I was furious, hurt, and above all, confused. How could she do this to me? How could she lie so easily? When she came back home, she was her usual bitchy self, trying to brush past me like I wasn't there. "Hey, babe," she snapped, tossing her coat on the sofa. "What's for dinner?" I looked at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lisa, we need to talk." She rolled her eyes, already annoyed. "Oh God, what now? I'm tired of your accusations. Just say what you want and get it over with." I took a deep breath. "I know about Mark. I know you've been seeing him behind my back. I found the medical records, Lisa. I saw the texts. I know you've been lying to me for months." Her face went pale for a fraction of a second, then she scoffed. "You're crazy, Dave. You're just paranoid. You're always imagining things." She crossed her arms, trying to act dismissive, but her voice cracked slightly. "No, Lisa, I'm not imagining this. I have proof. I know what you've been doing. I know you've chosen him over me." I stepped closer. "How could you do this? After everything, after all we went through, how could you betray me like this after my brain injury, after all the rehab? Was I just a lie to you, a project to fix and nothing more?" Her eyes flickered with anger, or maybe it was guilt, hard to tell with her. She started lying. "It's not what you think. I was just getting help from Mark because of my brain. It's complicated," she said, almost pleading. "He's a doctor, yes, but it's just about my recovery. It's professional. It's not what you're making it out to be." That was bullshit. I knew her better than that. Her medical records, her messages, they told a different story. She was lying, trying to cover her tracks, and then she spun it even nastier. "You're just jealous because I'm getting better, Dave. You can't handle that I'm moving on. Maybe this is what you need, someone who actually cares about me and my recovery, not some insecure guy who can't handle my progress." That hurt, big time. I felt my insides twist. She was attacking me, trying to turn everything around, making me feel guilty for catching her. I swear, it was like she was fighting me even when she knew she was caught red-handed. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and demand she tell me the truth. But instead, I kept my voice calm, cold even. "Don't lie to me anymore, Lisa. I saw the records. I know you've been reconstructing your neural pathways to prioritize your relationship with Mark. That's why you've been avoiding me, why you've been so secretive. You're choosing him over us, over me." Her face flushed, and she looked like she'd been caught in a trap, no way out, no excuses left. The room got heavy with silence. I could see her trying to think fast, her usual bitchy mask slipping away. I felt like I'd been punched so many times I couldn't breathe. I thought about everything, the way she'd lied, manipulated, abandoned what we had. I realized her mind was rewiring itself, but not in a healing way. It was rewiring her away from me, and that realization crushed me more than I thought possible. Not just her cheating, her actively erasing what we built, rewriting her priorities, and trying to convince me she was just doing what was best for her recovery. I stood there, waiting for her to say something, anything, but she just stared at me, silent, defiant. I knew then that this wasn't going to be easy. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about understanding how deep her betrayal went, how much of her mind she'd already given to Mark. I felt like an idiot for trusting her for so long. That's when I realized I had to decide what to do next. Because if she was rewiring her brain to forget us, then I had to figure out whether I was still part of her new reality, or if I was already gone in her mind. The night after our showdown, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything she said, everything I found, and the way her eyes flickered when I confronted her. I felt like I was caught in a storm, one I didn't have any control over. I kept asking myself how she had managed to lie so convincingly, how she could look me in the eye and pretend everything was fine. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that her entire brain was rewiring itself. Her memories, her feelings, her very sense of self. And she was doing it all to prioritize Mark, her surgeon, her rebound, her new obsession. I had to be honest with myself. No matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I wanted to believe she'd come back from this, I wasn't sure I could keep pretending everything was okay. I kept remembering the medical records, those detailed neural pathway maps, and how they showed her brain actively severing the neural links that connected us, those emotional bonds, those shared memories. It was like her mind was doing a clean sweep, deleting everything that reminded her of us and replacing it with images of Mark. That thought made my stomach turn. I decided I couldn't stay in that house. Not that night. Not with her. I packed a bag, grabbed some of my essentials, and left while she was out again, probably with Mark. I didn't want a confrontation that night. I just needed space to breathe, to think, to plan what I was going to do. I knew I couldn't just walk away without consequences, but I also knew I had to protect myself from her lies. I didn't trust her anymore. Not completely. Not after that. Level of deception. The next morning, I spent hours researching neural pathway reconstruction. Turns out, it's a real thing, part of neuroplasticity, where the brain rewires itself, especially after trauma. But what I read also said that such rewiring could be influenced by emotions, memories, and even subconscious biases. It struck me that Lisa's mind was actively reprogrammed, and her emotional state was tuned to favor Mark. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was rewiring her entire sense of what was real, what mattered, what she remembered. I kept going back to that detail. Her records showed her neural connections to me had been severed. The bond that once tethered us together was being erased. And I wondered, was it even possible to repair those connections after so much damage? Or was her brain already so rewired that the woman I married was gone, replaced by someone else, a version of herself that I didn't recognize? The thought made me feel hollow. I'd lost her, not just to another man, but to her own mind. In the days that followed, I started noticing other signs that her brain was changing. She'd forget little things, anniversaries, inside jokes, even some memories from our early years. It was small, but each one felt like a dagger to my chest. I wondered if her subconscious was doing this on purpose, or if her brain was just so rewired that those memories didn't matter anymore. Either way, I knew I had to decide whether to fight for her or let her go. Meanwhile, she kept acting bitchy, dismissive of my feelings. She'd deny everything, call me paranoid, accuse me of sabotaging her recovery. I know her well enough to see she was trying to gaslight me to make me doubt my own perceptions. It worked for a while. I'd question whether I was overreacting. Maybe I was just jealous or insecure. But then I'd remember the evidence, that cold, hard proof of her betrayal, and suddenly everything was crystal clear again. One night I sat her down, trying to get through to her. "Lisa, I know what you're doing," I told her plainly. "You're rewriting your brain, and I don't think you even realize it. You're choosing Mark over us, over everything we had, and I can't stay here and watch you do that. I love you, but I can't be part of a relationship where I don't even know what's real anymore." She looked at me with that same bitchy smirk, like I was the crazy one. That made me angrier. No more pretending, no more denial. I told her I was leaving to give her space, to let her brain settle if that's what it was doing. I left her standing there, speechless, or maybe just pretending to be. I knew I'd have to face whatever came next. Whether that meant fighting to get her back, or just accepting that she was lost to her own mind, I couldn't say. But I did know one thing. I was done being her pawn in some twisted neuroreconstruction experiment. I deserved better. We all do. After I left her that night, everything felt surreal. The house, usually so full of life and noise, seemed hollow now. I kept replaying everything I had uncovered, wondering if I was just overreacting or if this was really the end of us. But deep down, I knew the truth. Her brain was rewiring itself, and not in a way that could be fixed with a simple apology or a stubborn hope. Her records, her texts, her actions, they told me she'd already made her choice, and her mind was actively erasing the parts that connected us. I spent the next couple of days in a fog, trying to process what this all meant. I wasn't naive. She'd always been a bitchy, manipulative woman, but I never thought she would betray me like this, especially not so blatantly. I kept thinking about her neural pathway reconstruction, how her brain was literally severing her emotional ties to me, rewiring her to prioritize Mark. The scientific part of my brain kept trying to convince me that her mind was doing what it needed to heal, but my heart kept screaming that I was losing the woman I fell in love with, and I didn't know if I could survive that. In the middle of all this, I decided I had to find some kind of closure. I contacted a friend who was into psychology and neuroscience, someone I knew from college. I needed to understand if her brain could actually change that much, if her memories could be manipulated or erased so easily. He explained that neuroplasticity was real, that the brain could rewire itself after trauma, but that such rewiring was usually accompanied by conscious effort or therapy. What Lisa was doing was different. It was involuntary, subconscious, driven by her emotional state and her subconscious desire to prioritize Mark. Basically, her brain was doing the dirty work of breaking her old bonds and forging new ones with this new guy. It hit me hard. I realized she'd been actively choosing to forget us, to forget the life she once had with me, because her brain was literally rewiring itself to favor Mark. That thought made me feel sick. It was like I was losing her to her own mind, and no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't compete with that. How do you fight a brain that's doing everything to erase you? Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior grew even more bitchy and dismissive. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of crazy delusions. She told me I was overcomplicating things, gaslighting myself into thinking she was unfaithful. Every word she spat out was a lie, a distraction from her own guilt. She kept insisting that Mark was just helping her, that their relationship was purely professional, but her texts and the medical records said otherwise. It was a lie I'd heard so many times before, yet it still stung. Every time. One evening I got a message from her phone. It was from Mark, just a simple "can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach turned. That's when I realized she was actively hiding her meetings, planning secret encounters, probably sleeping with him whenever she thought I wasn't looking. That was the final confirmation I needed. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. She was gone, her mind and her body already committed to Mark. The next day, I decided to do something drastic. I sent her a message, something blunt, honest, and raw. "Lisa, I know you're with him. I know your brain is rewriting itself, and maybe that's what you want. But I want you to know that I loved you, and I still do. And I hope someday, if you wake up from whatever fog you're in, you remember who we were, because I don't want to lose you completely, but I can't stay here and watch you erase me." I didn't expect her to reply, but I needed her to know how I felt. Then I took a step back. I realized I had to protect myself from her manipulations, from her rewriting her entire mind, and pretending everything was fine. I started planning my next move, whether that was legal, emotional, or just walking away for good. I knew I couldn't force her to remember or feel again. Her neural pathways were rewiring after all. I just had to figure out if I was going to be part of her new world, or if I'd have to accept that I was already fading from her mind. That night I slept poorly, haunted by the idea that her brain was actively severing us, literally cutting the neural connections that made us us. I wondered if she'd ever come back, or if she was already gone, replaced by someone who only looked like Lisa but didn't feel like her anymore. The betrayal was so much deeper than I expected. It wasn't just an affair. It was her mind fighting to forget us, to rebuild her identity around Mark. And I realized that if I ever wanted peace, I'd have to accept the possibility that this was the end of our story. In the days that followed, I kept going over everything, trying to piece together what it all meant. Honestly, I felt like I was losing my mind. The woman I'd loved for years, the one I'd shared dreams and fears with, was slowly slipping away. Her own medical records showed her neural pathways, those connections that once linked us emotionally, being severed in her brain. It was like her mind was actively cutting out the part of her that remembered us together, replacing it with new, fabricated memories centered on Mark. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting against her brain itself. Neuroplasticity is powerful, sure, but this was different. It felt deliberate, even if I knew her mind was just doing what it thought was best for her recovery. But her behavior, her sharp words, her dismissiveness, her outright lies, those weren't just symptoms of brain rewiring. They were her choosing to forget. She was actively rewriting her history, and I was just collateral damage. One evening, I decided I needed answers, real concrete answers, not just my suspicions. I reached out to the neurologist who had been overseeing her treatment. I explained everything, including her records, her behaviors, the affair, and her attempts to erase us. The doctor listened carefully and told me that while neuroplasticity could be influenced by emotions and subconscious desires, what Lisa was doing, intentionally or not, was beyond typical therapy. Her brain was rewiring itself under her own subconscious influence, especially because her recovery was tied to her emotional state. The doctor said that her neural pathways connecting her to her previous life, her memories with me, had been disrupted, and that her emotional biases, like her obsession with Mark, were actively shaping her brain's rewiring. This was not just a physical process but an emotional one, driven by her subconscious needs. He warned that trying to pry her back into her old self might be futile if not dangerous. The brain, he said, would do what it believed was necessary to heal, regardless of the pain it caused. Hearing that made me feel even more helpless. I'd always thought love could conquer all, including most wounds. But now I was staring down the possibility that her mind was actively destroying the very bonds that once held us together. It was terrifying. I wondered if she even remembered what we had, or if her brain had already replaced those memories with new ones, ones that revolved around Mark and her supposed recovery. I also started to realize something else. Her attitude was more than just denial. It was like her brain was convincing her that she was better off without me. Every time she dismissed me, called me paranoid, or accused me of sabotaging her recovery, it was as if her subconscious was rewiring her to see me as the enemy. She was the victim of her own mind, and I was the villain in her new story. That realization broke something inside me, like I was already losing her forever. Meanwhile, she kept acting out. She'd throw barbed insults, accuse me of being insecure or controlling. She'd say I was just jealous because Mark was helping her get better. She even accused me of trying to sabotage her recovery, which was so absurd I almost laughed. But I didn't. I just felt cold, numb, like I was watching her become someone I didn't recognize, someone she was choosing to become. One day, I finally presented her with all the evidence I had, texts, records, my own notes, and told her, "Lisa, I love you, but I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. Your brain is rewiring itself, and I think you're already gone. Maybe you don't even realize it, but I do. I can't be part of this anymore." That was the first time I outright said it, admitted that I knew her mind was already changing her identity and that I might be losing her forever. Her response: she looked at me with a sneer like I was the crazy one. "You're just jealous, Dave. Jealous of my progress, jealous of Mark, jealous of anyone who gets close to me. Maybe you're the one who's holding me back." Those words cut deep. She said it like I was the villain, like I was trying to keep her from her new life. But I knew better. I knew her brain was already rewriting her version of reality, and I was just another casualty. That night I sat alone in my place, feeling emptier than I ever had before. Whatever hope I'd clung to that she'd come back, that I could somehow fix this, faded away. I realized I'd been fighting her brain, fighting her subconscious, and I was losing. Maybe she was already gone, replaced by someone who only looked like Lisa but didn't feel like her anymore. The pain was overwhelming. The betrayal, the heartbreak, knowing I was powerless against her mind, it was a lot to bear. But I knew I had to decide what was next. I couldn't keep waiting for her to remember us. I had to protect myself, whatever that meant. Some part of me still loved her, but a bigger part was starting to accept that I might already be too late. The last few weeks have been a blur of emotion, confusion, and a kind of quiet acceptance I never thought I'd reach. I stayed away from her as much as I could, trying to give her space to recover, whatever that even meant anymore. But honestly, I don't think she's recovering anything close to what we once had. Her brain has been rewired, her memories replaced, and her emotional connections severed. At least, that's what the evidence suggests. She's become someone I no longer recognize, and I don't think she recognizes herself either. One cold morning, I sat her down for what I knew would be the final conversation, probably the hardest one I've ever had. I told her I loved her, that I cared about her deeply, but that I couldn't stay in a relationship where her mind was rewriting everything we once shared. I explained that I understood her brain was doing what it thought was best, that her subconscious was driven by her injuries and her recovery, but that I couldn't be part of that rewriting process anymore. I had to protect myself from her, from this new version of her that didn't remember us, or worse, didn't want to. She looked at me with those cold, bitchy eyes that I'd grown to despise. "You're just jealous," she spat. "Jealous of Mark, jealous of my progress, jealous of anyone who gets close to me. Maybe you're the one who's holding me back. I'm better without you, Dave, better than I've ever been." That's when it hit me, this wasn't just denial. It was her brain convincing her to fully embrace her new life. She had already chosen Mark, not because she loved him, but because her neural pathways had rewired her to do so. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. I knew this was inevitable. Her brain had already made up its mind, and I was just the ghost of the past now. I reached out to hold her hand, but she pulled away sharply, like I was contaminating her new world. "Goodbye, Lisa," I managed to say, voice trembling. "I hope someday you remember who we were." She didn't reply. She just looked at me with that smirk, like she was finally free from my influence, from everything that once made us us. As I walked away that day, I felt a strange sense of relief mingled with heartbreak. I had fought as hard as I could, but her mind had already chosen Mark and her new life. I'd seen the evidence, felt the pain, and accepted that I was powerless. Her neural rewire was real, and it was irreversible, at least for now. Maybe someday, if her brain rewired itself again, if she somehow woke up from this fog, she'd remember us, remember me. But I wasn't holding my breath. Now I'm left with the scars of betrayal, emotional, mental, and somehow physical, knowing her brain's rewiring was ongoing. I've learned a lot from this nightmare, mostly that love isn't always enough to fight the forces of the mind. That sometimes the person you love doesn't just walk away. They forget who they are and what you mean to them. And that's a pain so deep, it leaves you questioning whether you ever truly knew them at all. So here I am, sharing my story, hoping someone out there might understand. Because if you're going through something similar, knowing your partner's brain is rewiring itself, or that they're actively choosing someone else over you, you're not alone. It hurts, it's confusing, and it can feel hopeless. But sometimes the best thing you can do is accept what you cannot change, protect your heart, and move on. Because in the end, some neural pathways are impossible to repair, and love alone doesn't always rewrite the brain.